The October rain hammered against the windshield of Marcus Webb's pickup truck as he navigated the winding highway outside of Asheville, North Carolina. It was nearly midnight, and the storm had transformed the mountain roads into ribbons of black glass, reflecting his headlights in fractured patterns. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white against the worn leather. He was exhausted. The construction site had kept him working until 9:30, and his supervisor had been on his case all week about meeting deadlines. At 42 years old, Marcus felt every year weighing on his shoulders. His back ached, his hands were calloused and cracked, and the thought of his empty apartment waiting for him in the city filled him with a hollow dread he couldn't quite name. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago. Sarah had taken the house, the kids spent weekends with him in his cramped 2-bedroom apartment, and most of his paycheck went to child support and alimony. Not that he begrudged it. His kids deserved everything. But somewhere along the way, Marcus had lost himself. He'd become a man who worked, paid bills, and existed in the spaces between obligations. The windshield wipers beat a rhythmic pattern as he rounded another curve. That's when he saw him. A figure stood on the shoulder of the road, thumb extended, rain pouring down his face. The man wore a thin jacket, jeans soaked through, and looked to be in his 70s. His white hair was plastered to his skull, and even from a distance, Marcus could see him shivering. Marcus's first instinct was to drive past. It was late, the weather was terrible, and picking up hitchhikers was generally considered a bad idea. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the old man stood there with such quiet dignity, despite being drenched. Maybe it was because Marcus had been that desperate once, standing in the rain outside a hospital when his car had broken down and his daughter was being born. He pulled over, tires crunching on the wet gravel. The old man approached the passenger window, and Marcus rolled it down. Rain immediately spattered against the interior. "Need a ride?" Marcus called out. "If you're offering, I'd be much obliged," the man replied. His voice was gravelly but warm, with a slight southern drawl that spoke of Georgia or Alabama. "Name's Walter. Walter Price. Marcus Webb. Get in before you catch pneumonia." Walter climbed into the truck with the careful movements of someone whose joints didn't work quite as well as they used to. He settled into the passenger seat with a grateful sigh, water dripping from his clothes onto the floor mat. "I apologize for making a mess of your truck," Walter said, pulling the seatbelt across his chest. "Don't worry about it. Where are you headed?" "Johnson City, Tennessee. Got a daughter there I haven't seen in a while." Marcus calculated the distance in his head. Johnson City was about an hour north, which would add time to his journey home. But he couldn't very well leave the old man on the side of the road. "I can get you there," Marcus said, pulling back onto the highway. For the first few miles, they rode in silence. Marcus focused on the road while Walter sat quietly, looking out at the rain-soaked landscape. The heater hummed, gradually warming the cab and filling it with the smell of wet fabric. "You work construction?" Walter finally asked, nodding toward the tool belt and hard hat in the back seat. "Yeah, 20 years now. Framing mostly, some finish work. Honest work. Built things with your hands." "I suppose so." Marcus didn't feel particularly proud of his work lately. It was just what he did to survive. "You don't sound convinced," Walter observed. Marcus glanced at him. The old man had sharp eyes, pale blue and penetrating, despite his weathered appearance. There was something about him that felt safe, open, like he actually cared about the answer. "It's just work," Marcus said with a shrug. "Pays the bills." That's a sad way to look at 20 years of your life. The comment hit Marcus harder than expected. He felt a flash of defensiveness, but it died quickly. The old man wasn't wrong. "What do you do?" Marcus asked, deflecting. "I'm retired now. Used to be a teacher, English literature and philosophy at a community college in Mobile." "Philosophy," Marcus repeated. "That's interesting." Walter chuckled, a dry sound that turned into a brief cough. "Most people think it's useless. And maybe it is, in terms of practical application. Can't fix a leaky faucet with Aristotle, but it teaches you how to think, how to examine your life." They drove on, the rain beginning to ease slightly. Marcus found himself oddly comfortable with this stranger in his truck. There was something about Walter's presence that filled the space without demanding anything. "Can I ask you something personal?" Walter said after a while. "I guess." "What's eating at you?" Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. "What makes you think something is?" "I've been teaching young people for 40 years. You learn to read faces. Yours says you're carrying something heavy." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He didn't usually talk about his problems with strangers. Hell, he didn't talk about them with friends either. But something about the darkness, the rain, the anonymity of this moment loosened his tongue. Got divorced earlier this year, he said finally. 2 kids. I see them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. I work 60-hour weeks, go home to an empty apartment and wonder what the point of it all is. That answer your question? Walter nodded slowly. I'm sorry. That's a hard road to walk. Yeah, well, life goes on, right? That's what everyone says. Life goes on, Walter agreed. But the question is, are you living it or just letting it happen to you? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. The miles passed beneath them, and gradually Marcus found himself talking more. He told Walter about his kids, Emma, who was 14 and wanted to be a veterinarian, and Jake, who was 11 and obsessed with basketball. He talked about how he'd met Sarah in college, how they'd been happy once, how things had slowly eroded over years of financial stress and miscommunication until they were strangers sharing a house. Walter listened without judgment, occasionally asking a question, but mostly just being present. And then, when Marcus finally fell silent, the old man began to speak. You know what my biggest regret in life is? Walter asked. What's that? I spent 20 years being angry at my father. Marcus glanced at him. What happened? He left when I was 16, just walked out one day. My mother raised me and my 2 sisters on her own, working 2 jobs, barely scraping by. I hated him for that. Hated him with everything I had. That's understandable. Maybe. But here's the thing. I let that anger define me. It shaped every decision I made. I worked myself half to death trying to prove I was nothing like him. I was a good provider, a present father, everything he wasn't. But I was so busy proving something that I forgot to actually enjoy my life. Forgot to be grateful for what I had. Walter turned to look at Marcus directly. And then, when I was 38, about your age, I found out the truth. My father had left because he had a gambling problem. He'd gotten into debt with some very bad people, and they'd threatened to hurt our family, so he left to protect us, took the debt with him, spent 20 years working it off in another state, never contacting us because he thought we were better off without him. Marcus felt his chest tighten. How did you find out? He wrote me a letter before he died. Explained everything, asked for forgiveness. Walter's voice grew thick with emotion. And I never got to tell him that I understood, that I forgave him, that I was sorry for the years I spent hating him. The truck's cab fell silent, except for the sound of rain and road noise. The point is, Walter continued, I wasted 20 years on anger and resentment. 20 years I could have spent building something meaningful, learning, growing, being happy, and I'll never get those years back. Marcus swallowed hard. What did you do after you found out? I made a choice. I decided I wasn't going to waste any more time. I started actually talking to my wife instead of just coexisting with her. I connected with my daughter, really connected, not just going through the motions. I started teaching not just to have a job, but because I genuinely wanted to help young people avoid the mistakes I made. And that worked? Walter smiled. It did. The last 30 years of my life have been infinitely richer than the first 40, all because I decided to change my perspective. They drove in contemplative silence for a while. Marcus felt something shifting inside him, like tectonic plates grinding against each other, preparing to realign. Why are you telling me this? Marcus finally asked. Because you remind me of myself at that age. You're at a crossroads, Marcus. You can keep doing what you're doing, surviving, getting by, letting life happen to you, or you can make a different choice. You can decide that your story isn't over, that this divorce isn't an ending, but a beginning. That's easy to say. It is, Walter agreed. Doing it is harder. But let me ask you something. 5 years from now, do you want to be sitting in this same truck, driving home from this same job, feeling this same emptiness? Marcus's throat felt tight. No. Then what are you going to do about it? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus didn't have an answer. Not yet. They were approaching Johnson City now, the lights of the town glowing against the dark sky. The rain had reduced to a light drizzle. Where should I drop you? Marcus asked. My daughter lives on Highland Avenue. I can direct you from here. As they navigated the quiet streets, Walter gave directions. Finally, they pulled up in front of a modest 2-story house with a well-maintained lawn and a porch light glowing warmly. Walter unbuckled his seatbelt but didn't immediately get out. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook and a pen. I want to give you something, he said, writing quickly. This is my phone number and email address. I'd like you to call me in a month and tell me what you've decided to do with your life. Marcus took the piece of paper, staring at it. Why? Because accountability helps. And because I believe you're capable of more than you think you are. Walter opened the door and stepped out, then turned back. One more thing. That old Greek philosopher Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I'd add to that, the unlived life is not worth examining. Start living, Marcus. Really living. With that, Walter closed the door and walked toward the house. Marcus watched as the front door opened, revealing a middle-aged woman who immediately pulled Walter into a tight embrace. There was crying, laughing, and then they disappeared inside together. Marcus sat in his truck for a long moment, staring at the piece of paper in his hand. Then he carefully folded it and put it in his wallet. As he pulled away from the curb and began the drive back to Asheville, something had fundamentally changed. The emptiness he'd felt earlier was still there, but now it felt different. Not like a void, but like a space waiting to be filled. For the first time in months, Marcus Webb began to think about the future not as something to be endured, but as something to be created. The rain had stopped completely by the time he reached the highway. Above him, breaks in the clouds revealed scattered stars, their light ancient and steady. Marcus turned on the radio, found a station playing classic rock, and drove through the night with a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know it yet, but that random act of kindness, picking up a stranger on a rainy night, would become the pivotal moment that divided his life into before and after. The conversation with Walter Price would echo in his mind for days, weeks, and eventually years, shaping decisions he hadn't yet imagined making. But all of that was still to come. For now, Marcus simply drove, his mind turning over Walter's words, feeling the first stirrings of something that might eventually become hope. Marcus stood in his apartment kitchen 3 days later, staring at the piece of paper Walter had given him. He'd read the phone number and email address so many times he'd memorized them, but he still pulled the worn paper from his wallet every morning while making coffee. It was 6:15 a.m. on a Thursday. Through his window, he could see the sun rising over Asheville, painting the Blue Ridge Mountains in shades of gold and orange. Emma and Jake would be waking up at Sarah's house right now, getting ready for school. He wouldn't see them until Saturday. The coffee maker gurgled its final sputter, and Marcus poured himself a cup. Black, no sugar. He sat down at his small dining table, a cheap IKEA set he'd bought after moving out, and opened his laptop. For the past 3 days, Walter's question had haunted him. 5 years from now, do you want to be sitting in this same truck, driving home from this same job, feeling this same emptiness? The answer was a resounding no. But knowing what he didn't want wasn't the same as knowing what he did want. That's what had kept Marcus awake for the past several nights, staring at his ceiling, trying to figure out who he was beneath the layers of obligation and routine. He'd been a construction worker for 20 years. Before that, he'd gone to community college for 2 years, studying business administration. But he'd dropped out when Sarah got pregnant with Emma. They'd needed the money, and construction paid well. He'd told himself it was temporary, that he'd finish his degree later. Later never came. But what did he actually want to do? That was the question that stumped him. He'd spent so long being what others needed, a provider, a father, a husband, that he'd lost track of what he needed. Marcus pulled up a blank document and started typing. Not a plan exactly, just thoughts. Things I used to enjoy. Drawing and drafting. Took a technical drawing class in high school, figuring out how things work. Teaching Jake how to build things. The satisfaction of seeing a project completed. He stared at the list. Then he added more. Things I'm good at. Reading blueprints, problem solving on construction sites, managing crews when given the chance. Explaining technical concepts, a thought began to form. It was vague, uncomfortable, and honestly a little terrifying. But it was there. What if he went back to school? The idea seemed absurd at first. He was 42 years old. He had child support payments and rent, and a truck that needed new tires. Going back to school would mean less money, more stress, and no guarantee of success. But then he thought about Walter's words. I wasted 20 years on anger and resentment. 20 years I could have spent building something meaningful. Was Marcus wasting his life? Not on anger, perhaps, but on inertia, on the path of least resistance, on telling himself that this was just how things were. He pulled up the website for the local community college and started browsing programs. Construction management caught his eye. It was a 2-year associate degree that would combine his practical experience with formal training in project management, cost estimation, and building codes. With that degree, he could move from the physical labor of construction to overseeing projects, maybe even starting his own contracting business eventually. The thought made his heart beat faster, not just with excitement, but with fear. Could he really do this? His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Can you help me with my math homework on Saturday? There's this problem about calculating angles that I don't understand." Marcus smiled. "Of course. We can work on it together." Emma sent back a heart emoji, and Marcus felt that familiar tug in his chest. His kids were his anchor, his reason for everything. But was he showing them the right example? Was he teaching them to pursue their dreams or to settle for whatever life handed them? He looked back at the community college website and clicked on the admissions page. That evening, Marcus called his best friend, Devon Hayes. They'd worked together on construction sites for 15 years, and Devon was the closest thing Marcus had to a brother. "Hey man, you got a minute?" Marcus asked when Devon picked up. "Sure." "What's going on? You sound weird." "I'm thinking about doing something crazy." Devon laughed. "This should be good. What kind of crazy are we talking? Skydiving, getting a motorcycle, finally asking out that woman at the hardware store? Going back to school?" There was a pause. "Seriously?" "Yeah. There's a construction management program at the community college. 2-year degree. I think I want to do it." Another pause, longer this time. "Marcus, that's actually not crazy. That's smart." "You think so?" "Hell yes. You're one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to construction. You can read a site better than most guys with degrees. You've just never had the paper to back it up." Marcus felt a wave of relief. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed someone to validate this idea. "But it's going to be hard," Devon continued. "You'll be working full-time and going to school, and the money's going to be tight." "I know. That's what scares me." "What scares you more? Trying and maybe failing, or never trying at all?" Marcus thought about Walter standing in the rain, about the regret in the old man's voice when he talked about wasted years. Never trying. Then you already know what you need to do. They talked for another 20 minutes, Devon offering practical advice about financial aid and flexible class schedules. By the time they hung up, Marcus felt more certain than he had in days. He opened his laptop again and started filling out the application for admission. On Saturday, Emma and Jake arrived at his apartment at 10 in the morning. Emma had her backpack full of homework and Jake had his basketball, which he immediately started bouncing against the living room wall until Marcus told him to stop. "How's school?" Marcus asked, pulling out sandwich fixings for lunch. "Boring," Jake said, flopping onto the couch. "Mrs. Henderson makes us do these stupid writing exercises about our feelings." "They're not stupid," Emma corrected, settling at the dining table. "You're just immature." "I'm not." "R2. "Hey," Marcus interrupted before it could escalate. "No fighting. Jake, feelings are important. Being able to express yourself is a valuable skill." Jake made a face, but didn't argue. Emma smiled at her father, and Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. "Dad, can we do my homework after lunch?" Emma asked. "I really don't understand these angle calculations." "Absolutely. And actually, I want to talk to both of you about something." Both kids looked at him with curiosity. Marcus took a breath. "I've decided to go back to school." Jake's eyes widened. "Like high school?" "No, college. Community college. There's a program that will help me get better jobs in construction. Maybe start my own business someday." Emma's face lit up. "Dad, that's amazing. When do you start?" "If I get accepted next semester, January." "You'll get accepted," Emma said with certainty. "You're really smart." The simple confidence in his daughter's voice made Marcus's throat tight. "Thanks, sweetie. It means I'll be busy, working and studying, but I'll still make sure we have our time together." "Will you have to do homework like me?" Jake asked. "Yep. Maybe we can study together sometimes." Jake considered this. "That's actually kinda cool. You'll be a student like us." They spent the afternoon working on Emma's math homework. Marcus found himself explaining angles and triangles with a patience and enthusiasm he hadn't felt in years. When Emma finally understood the concept, her face brightened with comprehension, and Marcus realized this was what he'd been missing, the joy of teaching, of sharing knowledge, of helping someone else grow. Later, while Jake shot baskets in the parking lot and Emma was absorbed in her phone, Marcus pulled out Walter's piece of paper again. He'd promised to call in a month, but it had only been a week. Still, he felt an urge to share what had happened. He dialed the number. Walter answered on the third ring. "Hello?" "Walter, it's Marcus Webb. We met last week. I gave you a ride to Johnson City." "Marcus! I was hoping you'd call. How are you?" "I'm good. Better than good, actually. I wanted to tell you, I'm going back to school. I applied for a construction management program at the community college. There was a smile in Walter's voice when he replied, "That's wonderful news. What made you decide?" "Something you said about not wanting to waste years. I realized I've been on autopilot for so long that I forgot I could actually make choices about my life." "That's a profound realization. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted, "but also excited. I haven't felt excited about the future in a long time." "Fear and excitement often feel the same," Walter said. "The difference is in what you do with the feeling. Are you going to let it paralyze you or use it as fuel?" "Fuel," Marcus said firmly. "Good man. Tell me something. What are you most looking forward to?" Marcus thought about it. "Honestly, showing my kids that it's never too late to change your path, that you don't have to accept whatever life hands you." "That's the best possible reason," Walter said warmly. "Marcus, I'm proud of you, and I don't say that lightly. Making the decision to change is the hardest part. Everything else is just following through." They talked for another 15 minutes. Walter shared stories about going back to graduate school in his 30s, about the challenges and the rewards. He offered practical advice about time management and studying while working full-time. Before they hung up, Walter said, "Remember, this is just the beginning. The path won't always be smooth. There will be times you want to quit, times you feel like you made a mistake. When those moments come, and they will, I want you to remember why you started. Keep that reason close." "I will. Thank you, Walter, for everything." "No need to thank me. You did this yourself. I just asked the right question at the right time." After they hung up, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He watched Jake shooting baskets through the window, his son's face scrunched in concentration, and thought about the future he was building, not just for himself, but for them. 2 weeks later, Marcus received his acceptance letter from the community college. He was scheduled to start in January, 3 months away. He'd be taking 2 classes his first semester, Introduction to Construction Management and Business Mathematics, while continuing to work full-time. The night he received the acceptance email, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He pulled out a sketch pad he'd kept from years ago and started drawing. Nothing fancy, just the outline of a house, the way he used to do when he was younger and still thought he might become an architect. The drawing was rough, unpracticed, but it felt good to create something with his hands that wasn't purely functional. As his pencil moved across the paper, Marcus felt a shift happening inside him. He was still the same person who'd picked up a hitchhiker in the rain 2 weeks ago, but he was also becoming someone new, someone with plans, with goals, with hope. Outside his apartment window, the October night was crisp and clear. The stars were visible, bright points of light in the darkness. Marcus set down his pencil and smiled. The journey was just beginning. January arrived with a brutal cold snap that turned Asheville into a frozen landscape of icy roads and gray skies. Marcus started his classes on a Monday evening, driving directly from the construction site to campus, still wearing his work boots and dusty jeans. The first night of Introduction to Construction Management, he sat in the back of the classroom and looked around. Most of his classmates were younger, early 20s, fresh out of high school or taking a break from 4-year universities. A few were closer to his age, but not many. He felt conspicuous, out of place, like everyone could see the years and exhaustion written on his face. The instructor, Professor Linda Chen, was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd worked in commercial construction for 25 years before transitioning to teaching, and it showed in how she commanded the room. "Construction management isn't about swinging hammers," she said during her introduction. "It's about coordinating people, materials, timelines, and budgets to turn plans into reality. If you think this will be an easy degree, you can leave now." Nobody left. That first class covered the syllabus, expectations, and a brief overview of what they'd be learning. Marcus took notes furiously, his handwriting cramped and uneven from years of not writing anything longer than work orders. His hand ached by the end of the 2-hour session. After class, as students filed out, Professor Chen called out, "Mr. Webb, can I speak with you for a moment?" Marcus's stomach dropped. What had he done wrong already? He approached her desk. "Yes, ma'am? I noticed on your enrollment form that you have 20 years of construction experience." "Yes, ma'am. Framing and finish work, mostly residential but some commercial." She nodded. "That's valuable. Most of these students have never set foot on a real construction site. Your practical knowledge will be an asset, but I need you to understand something. Experience and education are different things. You'll need to be open to learning concepts that might challenge what you think you know. Can you do that? Marcus straightened his shoulders. I can. Good. I also noticed you're enrolled part-time while working full-time. That's going to be difficult. I know. Do you have support? Family? Friends? Marcus thought about Emma and Jake, about Devon, about Walter. Yes, I do. Professor Chen smiled for the first time. Then you have a fighting chance. Welcome to the program, Mr. Webb. Work hard. Yes, ma'am, I will. The first month was brutal. Marcus would wake at 5:30, get to the construction site by 6:30, work until 4, drive to campus, attend class from 5 to 7, then drive home and study until midnight. He'd collapse into bed, sleep for 5 hours, and do it all over again. His business mathematics class was particularly challenging. He hadn't done algebra in over 20 years, and the concepts that came easily to younger students made him feel stupid and slow. He'd sit at his dining table long after midnight, staring at equations that seemed to swim before his tired eyes, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. On Wednesday evenings when he had the kids, he'd cut his study time short, spending the evening helping them with homework, making dinner, and trying to be present despite his exhaustion. Emma noticed the change in him immediately. "Dad, you look tired," she said one night in early February, watching him rub his eyes as he reviewed her English essay. "I'm okay, sweetie." "Are your classes hard?" "Yeah," he admitted. "Harder than I expected, but that's okay. Things worth doing are usually hard." She studied him with those perceptive 14-year-old eyes. "Are you happy?" The question surprised him. Marcus thought about it, really thought about it. Was he happy? "Yes," he said, realizing it was true. "I'm exhausted and stressed, but I'm happier than I've been in years. Does that make sense?" Emma smiled. "Yeah, you seem more alive, like you're actually here instead of just going through the motions." Her words hit him hard. He hadn't realized how checked out he'd been, how much his kids had noticed his emotional absence during the last years of his marriage and the months after the divorce. "I'm trying," Marcus said softly. "I'm trying to be better. For you guys, and for myself." Emma hugged him, something she didn't do as often now that she was a teenager. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Marcus held her tight, blinking back unexpected tears. By March, Marcus had hit his first major wall. He'd failed his second business mathematics exam, scoring a 58%. He sat in his truck in the campus parking lot after getting the grade back, staring at the red marks on his paper, feeling like a complete failure. His phone rang. It was Devon. "Hey man, you still on campus? Want to grab a beer?" "I don't know if I'm good company right now." "That's exactly when you need a beer. I'm at Murphy's Tavern. Get your ass over here." 20 minutes later, Marcus slid into a booth across from Devon, who pushed a cold beer across the table. "What's wrong?" Devon asked. "You look like someone died." "I failed my math exam, like really failed it. I don't know if I can do this." Devon took a long drink of his beer. "You remember that job we did 3 years ago? The Riverside development?" Marcus frowned. "Yeah. Why? Remember how the whole project was behind schedule when we got assigned to it? The previous crew had screwed up the framing on half the units, and the developer was talking about lawsuits? Yeah. We were there for 6 months fixing that mess. And who figured out how to reframe those units without tearing everything down? Who came up with the solution that saved the developer hundreds of thousands of dollars?" Marcus shrugged. "I had an idea about reinforcing the existing structure." "Exactly. You. Marcus, you're one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to problem solving, so you failed one math exam. That doesn't mean you can't do this. It means you need to adjust your approach." "It's not just the exam," Marcus said quietly. "It's everything. I'm exhausted all the time. I barely see my kids. I'm 42 years old, sitting in classes with kids half my age. Sometimes I think I should just give up. Go back to the way things were. Then be miserable? I wasn't miserable. I was fine." "Bullshit," Devon said bluntly. "You were dead inside, man. I watched you for 2 years after Sarah left, going through the motions like a zombie. Now you're struggling, yeah, but you're actually fighting for something. There's a difference." Marcus stared into his beer. "What if I can't cut it? Then you can't, and you'll figure out something else. But you won't know unless you keep trying. And I don't think you're someone who gives up easily." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Devon added, "Listen, I'm not good at math either, but my cousin's wife tutors at the college. Let me get you her number. Maybe some extra help would make a difference." Marcus felt a small spark of hope. "Yeah, okay, thanks. That's what friends are for. Now drink your beer and stop feeling sorry for yourself." Marcus laughed, despite himself. "You're an ass, you know that? One of my best qualities. The tutoring helped. Marcus started meeting with Stacey Morrison, Devon's cousin-in-law, twice a week at the campus library. She was a retired accountant who volunteered as a math tutor, and she had a gift for explaining concepts in ways that clicked for Marcus. "You're not stupid," she told him during their third session when Marcus apologized for asking the same question twice. "You're just learning a language you haven't spoken in 20 years. Give yourself some grace." Slowly, painfully, Marcus began to understand. The equations started making sense. He developed study strategies that worked for his tired brain, breaking problems into smaller steps, relating math concepts to construction problems he'd actually solved on job sites, using physical objects to visualize abstract concepts. His next exam score was a 72%. Not great, but passing. The one after that was an 81%. By the end of his first semester, Marcus had earned a B in Introduction to Construction Management and a C+ in Business Mathematics. Not perfect, but he'd done it. He'd survived. On the last day of class, Professor Chen called him to her desk again. "Mr. Webb, I wanted to tell you that I've been impressed with your progress this semester. Thank you. It's been challenging. I'm sure it has been, but you've shown real dedication. You're always prepared. You ask good questions, and I can see you applying what you learn. That's what education is supposed to be about. I appreciate that. I'm teaching construction project management next semester. It's one of the more demanding courses in the program, but I think you'll excel in it. I hope you'll sign up." Marcus felt a surge of pride. "I will. Thank you, Professor." As he walked out of the building into the warm May evening, Marcus pulled out his phone and called Walter. They'd been talking every few weeks, Walter checking in on his progress and offering encouragement. "I made it through my first semester," Marcus said when Walter answered. "Congratulations. How does it feel?" "Like I climbed a mountain. I'm exhausted, but proud, I guess." "You should be. What's next?" "2 more classes in the fall. And I've been thinking, Professor Chen suggested I might be good at teaching eventually. Maybe I could become an instructor after I get more experience." "Now that's an interesting thought," Walter said warmly. "You know, some of my best students were the ones who came to education later in life. They brought real-world experience and genuine appreciation for learning. You'd be excellent at it." "I don't know about that." "I do. Marcus, you've already accomplished something remarkable. You decided to change your life, and you followed through despite every obstacle. That's not something everyone can do. Whatever comes next, you're going to be fine." After they hung up, Marcus sat in his truck for a while, watching students walk across campus. 6 months ago, he'd been lost, going through the motions, convinced his life was essentially over, except for the parts that involved his kids. Now he had a future he was actively building. It wasn't easy, and there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, Marcus Webb felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The summer break gave Marcus a chance to catch his breath. He picked up extra hours at work, saving money for the fall semester, and spent more time with Emma and Jake. They went camping in the Smoky Mountains for a long weekend, something they hadn't done since before the divorce. Around the campfire on their last night, Jake asked, "Dad, are you going to keep going to school?" "I am. Why do you ask?" "Just wondering. Some of my friends' parents talk about doing stuff but never actually do it." Emma added, "You're different now? More focused?" Marcus poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks drift up into the darkness. "I'm trying to show you guys something important. It's never too late to change direction if you're not happy with where you're going." "Were you really unhappy before?" Jake asked. Marcus considered lying, softening the truth, but decided his kids deserved honesty. "Yeah, buddy. I was. Not because of you two. You're the best part of my life. But I felt stuck, like I was just existing instead of really living." "And now?" Emma asked. "Now I feel like I'm building something, not just a career, but a life I actually want to live." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the forest alive with night sounds around them. Marcus felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. In August, Marcus started his second semester. He took construction project management with Professor Chen and construction safety and regulations with Professor Thomas Reeves, a former OSHA inspector. This semester felt different. Marcus was more confident, more settled into his routine. He knew how to balance work, school, and family time. He learned to study effectively, to ask for help when he needed it, and to not be intimidated by younger classmates. In construction project management, they worked on a semester-long group project, designing a complete project plan for a theoretical commercial building. Marcus was grouped with 3 other students: Kelly Brennan, a 23-year-old who'd worked in her father's contracting business; Miguel Santos, a 25-year-old recent immigrant from Brazil with a degree in engineering that wasn't recognized in the US; and Brad Whitmore, a 19-year-old who seemed more interested in his phone than the class. Their first group meeting did not go well. "So, what do we even have to do?" Brad asked, barely looking up from his phone. Kelly sighed. "Did you read the assignment? We need to create a complete project plan, timeline, budget, resource allocation, risk assessment." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It is a lot of work," Miguel said in his accented English. "This is 30% of our grade." Marcus watched the dynamics, recognizing a problem. They needed leadership, and Brad clearly wasn't going to step up. Neither was Miguel, who seemed uncertain about his English skills despite being perfectly articulate. "Okay, let's organize this," Marcus said. "Kelly, you mentioned your dad's in contracting. Want to handle the budget and cost estimation?" Kelly looked relieved. "Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm best at." "Miguel, with your engineering background, can you take the lead on the technical specifications and structural planning?" Miguel nodded, straightening in his chair. "I can do this, yes." "Brad, we'll need someone to compile everything into the final presentation." "Can you handle the graphics and formatting?" Brad shrugged. "I guess. I'm pretty good with PowerPoint." "Great. I'll coordinate everything and handle the timeline and resource allocation. We'll meet once a week to check progress. Everyone okay with that?" They all agreed, and Marcus felt a small thrill. This was management, identifying people's strengths, delegating effectively, keeping everyone on task. This was what he was learning to do. Over the next several weeks, the project came together. Marcus discovered he was good at coordinating, at seeing how different pieces fit together, at problem-solving when issues arose. Kelly turned out to be brilliant with numbers, but needed reassurance about her ideas. Miguel had incredible technical knowledge, but needed help translating it into simpler terms. Even Brad, once given clear expectations and regular check-ins, contributed solid work on the presentation materials. Professor Chen watched their progress during weekly group updates, and Marcus caught her nodding approvingly more than once. In October, almost exactly a year after he'd picked up Walter in the rain, Marcus's construction crew was assigned to a major residential project, a custom home for a wealthy client on the outskirts of Asheville. The project was behind schedule and over budget, and the developer had brought in Marcus's company to salvage it. On his first day walking through the site, Marcus immediately saw the problems. The previous contractor had cut corners on the foundation, the framing was sloppy in several areas, and the electrical rough-in didn't match the plans. His supervisor, Ray Mitchell, was ready to tear everything out and start over, a solution that would cost the client tens of thousands of dollars and weeks of additional time. "Wait," Marcus said, studying the blueprints and comparing them to what had been built. "I think there's another way." He spent his lunch break that day sketching out an alternative approach, applying concepts he'd learned in his project management class about problem-solving and resource optimization. Instead of complete demolition, they could reinforce the foundation in targeted areas, sister new framing members to the existing ones, and reroute the electrical with minimal wall opening. Marcus presented his plan to Ray, who was skeptical but willing to listen. Marcus walked him through it step by step, using the technical language he'd learned in school to articulate why his approach would work. "Where'd you learn to think like this?" Ray asked when Marcus finished. "Community college. I'm getting my degree in construction management." Ray looked at him with new respect. "You're in school. How the hell do you have time for that?" "I make time. It's important." Ray studied the plans again. "This could work. Hell, this is better than my solution." "You sure you want to stay in the field? With thinking like this, you should be in the office." Something clicked in Marcus's mind. He'd been so focused on getting through school that he hadn't thought much about what came after. But suddenly, he could see it. A path from where he was to where he wanted to be. "Maybe eventually," Marcus said. "First, I need to finish my degree." Ray approved Marcus's plan, and they implemented it over the next 3 weeks. The solution worked perfectly, saving the client $40,000 and 3 weeks of time. The developer was so impressed that he specifically requested Marcus for his next project. That night, Marcus called Walter to share the news. "You're applying your education in real time," Walter said. "That's when learning becomes truly valuable, when you can take concepts and use them to solve actual problems." "It felt good," Marcus admitted, "really good. Like all the late nights studying finally paid off. This is just the beginning, Marcus. Wait until you see where this takes you." In December, Marcus's group presented their project in construction project management class. They'd created a comprehensive plan for a 50,000 square foot commercial building, complete with detailed timelines, budgets, safety protocols, and risk mitigation strategies. Their presentation was scheduled last, after 4 other groups. Marcus watched the others present, noting their strengths and weaknesses, mentally adjusting their own presentation to stand out. When their turn came, Marcus opened with a brief overview, then handed off to each team member for their specialized sections. Kelly's budget analysis was meticulous. Miguel's technical specifications were impressive. Brad's visual presentation was clean and professional. And Marcus tied it all together, demonstrating how each element interconnected to create a viable project plan. When they finished, Professor Chen asked several pointed questions, testing their knowledge. Marcus fielded most of them, but he made sure to redirect questions to his teammates when they had relevant expertise. It was a team effort, and he wanted that to show. After all presentations were complete, Professor Chen announced the grades. Most groups received Bs or B minuses. 2 groups got B pluses. And finally, Professor Chen said, looking at Marcus's group, "I'm giving Team 5 an A. This was the most comprehensive, well-thought-out project I've seen in 3 years of teaching this class. The coordination was excellent, the technical details were sound, and most importantly, you demonstrated genuine understanding of project management principles, not just memorization. Well done." Kelly actually squeaked with joy. Miguel grinned broadly. Brad high-fived Marcus, and Marcus felt a surge of pride that made all the exhaustion, all the late nights, all the struggle worthwhile. After class, Professor Chen pulled Marcus aside again. "Mr. Webb, I want to discuss something with you." "Yes, ma'am?" "I've been talking with the department head. We have a paid internship opportunity coming up in the spring, working with a local construction management firm on commercial projects. It's 20 hours a week, and it pays $15 an hour. I think you'd be perfect for it." Marcus's mind raced. 20 hours a week meant reducing his hours at the construction site, which meant less money. But it also meant real experience in construction management, which could lead to better opportunities after graduation. "I'm interested," Marcus said carefully. "Can I think about it and get back to you?" "Of course, but don't take too long. The application deadline is January 15th. That night, Marcus sat at his dining table with a calculator, a notepad, and his bank statement spread out before him. He ran the numbers 3 different ways, trying to figure out if he could afford to take the internship. If he reduced his construction hours to 30 per week and worked the internship 20 hours, his total income would actually be slightly less than working 50 hours of construction. But he'd gain experience that could lead to a salaried management position after graduation, positions that typically paid $50,000 to $70,000 per year instead of his current $42,000. It was an investment in his future, but it would make the next 6 months even tighter financially. His phone rang. Sarah. "Hey," Marcus answered, wondering what she needed. They were cordial but not close, their conversations usually limited to logistics about the kids. "Marcus, I wanted to talk to you about something. Emma mentioned you might take an internship in the spring. I'm considering it." "Why?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I've been watching you this past year. The way you've gone back to school, how focused you've been. The kids talk about it all the time, how proud they are of you." Marcus wasn't sure where this was going. "Okay. What I'm trying to say is, if you need to reduce the child support for a few months while you do this internship, I won't fight you on it. I know you're trying to build something better for yourself and for them. I can cover the difference temporarily." Marcus was genuinely stunned. "Sarah, thank you. That's incredibly generous. You're a good father, Marcus. You always have been. I want you to succeed. And honestly, seeing you pursue your goals is good for Emma and Jake. They need to see that example." After they hung up, Marcus sat staring at his phone, overwhelmed with gratitude. Sarah had every right to hold him to their divorce agreement, but instead, she was supporting his growth. It was a kindness he hadn't expected and wouldn't forget. He called Professor Chen the next morning and accepted the internship. As December turned to January, Marcus completed his 2nd semester with an A in construction project management and a B+ in construction safety and regulations. His GPA was now 3.2, not perfect, but solid. More importantly, he'd proven to himself that he could do this. On New Year's Eve, Marcus sat on his apartment balcony despite the cold, watching fireworks explode over downtown Asheville in the distance. He thought about where he'd been a year ago, lost, directionless, going through the motions of existence, and he thought about where he was now. Still tired, still struggling sometimes, but fundamentally changed. He had purpose, direction, hope. His phone buzzed with a text from Walter. "Happy New Year, Marcus. Proud of everything you've accomplished. Here's to the year ahead." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Thank you for asking the right question when I needed it most. Happy New Year." As the fireworks continued, Marcus made a promise to himself. Whatever challenges came in the year ahead, and there would be challenges, he wouldn't give up. He'd keep pushing forward, keep learning, keep growing, because he wasn't the same man who'd picked up a hitchhiker on a rainy night. He was someone new, someone better, and he was just getting started. The internship at Morrison & Associates Construction Management began on a frigid Monday in late January. Marcus arrived at their downtown Asheville office at 7 in the morning, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt instead of his usual work clothes. He felt awkward and overdressed, uncertain of what to expect. The receptionist directed him to a conference room where he met his supervisor, Patricia Morrison, the company's founder. She was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent decades on construction sites. "Marcus Webb?" She extended her hand, her grip firm. "Pat Morrison, Professor Chen spoke highly of you. Thank you for this opportunity, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel ancient. It's Pat." She gestured to a chair. "Coffee? Please." As Pat poured coffee from a carafe, she said, "Professor Chen told me you have 20 years of field experience. That's more than most of my staff. What made you decide to go back to school?" Marcus had answered this question before, but he still took a moment to choose his words carefully. "I realized I'd been coasting, going through the motions. I wanted to do more than just execute. I wanted to understand the full picture, planning, budgeting, managing projects from start to finish." Pat nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Too many people in this industry think experience alone is enough, but construction is changing. Technology, regulations, client expectations, it's all evolving. The guys who adapt survive, the ones who don't get left behind." She slid a folder across the table. "This is the Riverside Medical Center project. 3-story medical office building, $12 million budget, 18-month timeline. We're 3 months in, and we're already seeing delays from the site prep contractor." Marcus opened the folder and began scanning the documents. Blueprints, schedules, contractor agreements, daily reports. "Your job," Pat continued, "is to shadow me and my project managers, learn our systems and make yourself useful. You'll attend site meetings, review documentation, help with scheduling and coordination. Questions?" "Where do you want me to start?" Pat smiled. "That's the right question. We have a site meeting at 9. Come with me and take notes, lots of notes. Construction management is 70% communication and 30% everything else. You're about to see what that looks like." The site meeting was controlled chaos. Representatives from 6 different subcontractors gathered in a trailer on the construction site, each with their own concerns, complaints, and excuses for why their portion of the work was behind schedule. Marcus sat in the back, notebook in hand, watching Pat orchestrate the discussion. She was firm but fair, calling out bullshit when she heard it, but also listening to legitimate concerns. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of the project, every deadline, every cost, every dependency between trades. When the electrical contractor complained that the HVAC contractor's ductwork was blocking his conduit runs, Pat pulled up the coordinated drawings on her tablet. "According to the coordination drawings signed off by both of you on December 14th, your conduits run at elevation 12 feet, 4 inches. Their ducts run at 14 feet even. How exactly are they blocking you?" The electrical contractor shifted uncomfortably. "Well, in the field, things are different. Then you should have flagged this during the coordination phase. That's what it's for." She turned to the HVAC contractor. "Can you adjust your duct elevation in that area without impacting your equipment connections?" "Probably. I'd need to check with my foreman." "Do that today. Email me by 5 with a solution. If there isn't one, the electrical contractor will need to reroute, and any cost increase comes out of their contingency, not the project budget. Understood?" Both contractors nodded, chastened. The meeting continued for 2 hours. By the end, Pat had identified 17 action items, assigned responsibility for each one, and set clear deadlines. Marcus's hand ached from writing, but his notebook was full of observations about how Pat handled conflicts, made decisions, and kept the project moving forward. After everyone left, Pat turned to Marcus. "What did you notice?" You didn't let anyone off the hook, but you also didn't embarrass them. Exactly. These contractors have to work together for months. If I humiliate someone in front of their peers, they'll get defensive and stop communicating. But I also can't let excuses slide, or the whole schedule falls apart. It's a balance. You knew the drawings better than they did. I'd better. It's my job to know every detail of this project. These contractors are juggling multiple jobs. I'm only focused on this one. That's my advantage. Over the following weeks, Marcus absorbed everything. He attended site meetings, reviewed change order requests, tracked deliveries, updated schedules, and learned the software systems Morrison and Associates used for project management. He worked his 30 hours per week at the construction site in the mornings, then spent afternoons and evenings at the Morrison office or on their job sites. The schedule was punishing, but Marcus thrived on it. Everything he'd learned in class was suddenly concrete and real. He could see how theoretical concepts played out in actual projects, how small decisions cascaded into big consequences, how good management prevented problems rather than just reacting to them. In March, Pat assigned Marcus his first independent task, reviewing a subcontractor's schedule submission for a mechanical system installation. The HVAC contractor submitted this updated schedule, Pat explained, handing Marcus a thick document. They're asking for an extension because of equipment delivery delays. I need you to review it and tell me if their request is legitimate or if they're trying to cover for poor planning. Marcus spent 3 hours going through the schedule line by line. He cross-referenced equipment delivery dates with manufacturer records, checked the contractor's crew size against industry standards for the scope of work, and analyzed the logic of their sequencing. His conclusion: the contractor was padding their schedule. The equipment delay is real, Marcus reported to Pat. 6 weeks late delivery on the main air handling units, but they're requesting a 12-week extension. The math doesn't work. Show me. Marcus walked her through his analysis. The equipment installation is 5 weeks of work with their proposed crew size. Add 6 weeks for the delay, that's 11 weeks total impact. But they're also showing reduced crew sizes during that period, which extends the installation time. If they maintain their original crew size, they can absorb part of the delay. Pat studied his work, nodding slowly. This is good analysis, really good. What do you recommend? Approve a 6-week extension for the equipment delay, but require them to maintain their original crew size. That keeps most of the project schedule intact. Agreed. Write up your recommendation formally, and I'll present it to the owner. Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was real work, meaningful work, and he'd done it well. Pat used his recommendation in her meeting with the owner, who accepted it. The HVAC contractor wasn't happy about maintaining full crews, but they couldn't argue with Marcus's analysis. After the meeting, Pat called Marcus into her office. That was excellent work on the HVAC schedule. You have a good eye for detail and the ability to think critically. Those are the skills that separate OK project managers from great ones. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do real analysis. Pat leaned back in her chair. Marcus, I want to talk to you about something. Your internship ends in May. What are your plans after graduation? I haven't thought that far ahead, honestly. Finish my degree, then probably look for a project coordinator position somewhere. What if you didn't have to look? What if there was a position waiting for you here? Marcus's heart rate picked up. Are you offering me a job? Not yet, but I'm telling you that if you finish strong, both here and in your classes, there will be a position for you at Morrison and Associates. Project coordinator to start, with a path to project manager within 2 years if you prove yourself. Thank you, that's incredible. Don't thank me yet. Earn it. Show me you can handle more responsibility. I'm going to give you a bigger role on the Riverside project. You'll coordinate directly with subcontractors, manage RFI responses, and track submittals. Think you can handle that while finishing school? It would mean even less sleep, even more pressure, but it was exactly the opportunity Marcus had been working toward. Yes, absolutely. Good. Let's see what you're made of. The next 2 months tested Marcus in ways he hadn't anticipated. Coordinating subcontractors meant navigating egos, miscommunications, and constant problem-solving. Contractors would miss deadlines, blame each other, and look to Marcus to sort it out. He had to be firm without being antagonistic, had to enforce standards without making enemies. There were mistakes. In early April, Marcus approved a concrete pour without verifying that all the embedded electrical conduits had been inspected. The pour happened, and 2 days later, the electrical inspector flagged missing conduits that were now encased in concrete. Pat called Marcus into her office, and he knew he was in trouble. "Walk me through what happened," she said, her voice level, but serious. Marcus explained the mistake, not making excuses. "I didn't verify the electrical inspection before approving the pour. That's on me." "You're right, it is. Do you know what this mistake cost? About $8,000 to core drill and patch the concrete, plus 3 days of scheduled delay. 8,400 actually, plus the ripple effect on dependent trades, probably 15,000 total." Pat let that sink in. "Why didn't you verify the inspection?" "The concrete contractor said everything was ready. I trusted him without checking." "And what did you learn?" "Trust, but verify. Never assume. Always check documentation." Pat nodded. "Exactly. Marcus, you're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. What matters is whether you learn from them. This mistake cost us money and time, but it's not catastrophic. You owned it, you didn't deflect blame, and you identified the root cause. That's what I need to see." "So I'm not fired?" "Fired? No. But you're going to personally coordinate with every trade for the next month to make sure all inspections are documented before work proceeds. Consider it penance and education combined." Marcus threw himself into the corrective action. He created a new checklist system for verification, implemented it across all trades, and personally confirmed every inspection for weeks. The trades grumbled about the extra oversight, but Marcus was relentless. By the end of April, Pat pulled him aside after a site meeting. "You've turned a mistake into a system improvement," she said. "The checklist you created. I'm implementing it across all our projects. That's the mark of someone who doesn't just solve problems, but prevents future ones." In early May, Marcus took his final exams. 4 semesters, 12 classes, countless hours of study. He sat in the exam rooms, exhausted but focused, drawing on everything he'd learned. When his last exam was complete, Marcus walked out of the building into a warm spring evening. Students were celebrating around him, cheering, hugging, taking photos. He'd done it. He'd actually finished his degree. He pulled out his phone and called Walter. "It's Marcus, I'm done. I finished my last exam." Walter's voice was warm with pride. "Congratulations. How do you feel?" "Honestly, I'm too tired to feel much of anything, but also proud. Really proud. You should be. 2 years ago, you picked up a stranger in the rain. Now you're a college graduate with a degree and a career ahead of you. That's remarkable. I couldn't have done it without that conversation we had. You changed my life, Walter." "No, Marcus. You changed your own life. I just asked a question. You did all the hard work." After they hung up, Marcus sat on a bench outside the academic building, watching the sun set behind the mountains. He thought about the journey, the late nights, the stress, the moments of doubt, the small victories that accumulated into something larger. His phone buzzed with texts. "Devon, heard you finished. Proud of you, man. Beers on me this weekend." "Emma, Dad, Jake and I are so proud of you. Can we come to your graduation?" "Sarah, congratulations, Marcus. The kids won't stop talking about how their dad is graduating college. You set a great example for them." And finally, Professor Chen. "Mr. Webb, congratulations on completing the program. Your final grades: Construction Project Management, Advanced. A. Construction Law and Contracts, A. Final GPA, 3.4. You should be very proud. I'll see you at graduation." Professor Chen. Marcus sat there reading and rereading the messages, feeling emotions he couldn't quite name: gratitude, pride, hope, relief. His phone rang. Pat Morrison. "Marcus, congratulations on finishing. When you have a moment, come by the office. I have something to discuss." The next morning, Marcus arrived at Morrison & Associates to find Pat waiting with a formal offer letter. "Project coordinator position," she said, sliding the document across her desk. "$55,000 annual salary, full benefits, 2 weeks vacation. You'll be assigned to the Riverside project full-time, and you'll rotate through other projects for the next year to build experience." Marcus stared at the number. 55,000, 13,000 more than he'd been making in construction, with benefits. "There's something else," Pat continued. "Morrison & Associates has been growing. I'm 63 years old, and I'm thinking about succession planning. I'm building a team that can eventually take over the company. You're young enough to be part of that future if you want it. You're offering me a career path, not just a job." "Exactly. Work hard, keep learning, prove yourself, and in 5 to 10 years, you could be running projects worth tens of millions of dollars, maybe eventually become a partner. But that's all dependent on you, on your dedication, your integrity, and your willingness to keep growing." Marcus thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago, driving home from construction sites, feeling empty and lost. He thought about Walter's question. 5 years from now, do you want to be sitting in this same truck, driving home from this same job, feeling this same emptiness? I accept, Marcus said. Thank you for this opportunity. Pat shook his hand. Don't thank me. Earn it. Start date is June 1st, day after graduation. Graduation day arrived on a perfect May afternoon. Marcus wore his cap and gown, feeling slightly ridiculous but also deeply proud. Emma and Jake were in the audience with Sarah, all three of them beaming. Devon was there too, whistling and cheering when Marcus's name was called. As Marcus walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he caught sight of Professor Chen in the faculty section, nodding at him with a small smile. And in the back row, he saw an unexpected figure, Walter Price, his white hair distinctive even from a distance, applauding along with everyone else. After the ceremony, Marcus found Walter waiting outside the auditorium. You came, Marcus said, genuinely surprised. Of course I came. I wanted to see how the story turned out. It's not over yet. No, Walter agreed, but this is a significant chapter. You took a chance on yourself, Marcus. That takes courage. Emma and Jake ran up, interrupting the conversation. Dad, we're so proud. Emma hugged him tightly. Jake added, You're the coolest dad ever. You went to college like us. Sarah approached more slowly, smiling. Congratulations, Marcus. You really did it. Thank you. And thank you for supporting me through this. The reduced child support those few months made a real difference. You would have done the same for me. Devon appeared with a group of Marcus's classmates from the construction management program. Webb, graduation party at Asheville Brewing. You coming? Marcus looked at his kids, at Sarah, at Walter. Later, maybe. Right now, I want to celebrate with my family. They went to dinner at Emma's favorite restaurant, a Mexican place with excellent enchiladas and overly enthusiastic mariachi music. Jake told stories about his basketball team, Emma talked about her plans for high school next year, and Marcus felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Later that evening, after dropping the kids back at Sarah's house, Marcus returned to his apartment. It was small and sparsely furnished, but it felt different now, not like a temporary space he was stuck in, but like a launching pad for whatever came next. He pulled out the piece of paper Walter had given him 2 years ago, now worn and creased from being carried in his wallet. The phone number, the email address, the note, call me in a month. Marcus had called every few weeks for 2 years, sharing his progress, his struggles, his victories. Walter had become a mentor, a friend, a reminder of why Marcus had started this journey. He picked up his phone and composed an email. Walter, thank you for coming to graduation. It meant more than you know. 2 years ago, you asked me a question that changed my life. You asked where I'd be in 5 years if I didn't make changes. Today, I can answer that question differently. 5 years from now, I'll be managing major construction projects, maybe teaching part-time, showing my kids that it's never too late to pursue your goals. You told me about your regrets, the 20 years you spent angry at your father. I don't want to have those regrets. I want to live intentionally, purposefully, gratefully. So thank you for the question, for the wisdom, for caring enough about a stranger in a truck to share your story. Your friend, Marcus. He hit send, then opened his laptop. He had one more thing to do. Marcus began writing an email to Professor Chen, asking about opportunities to guest lecture in her classes. He had a story to share with future students about taking chances, about persevering through challenges, about the power of deciding that your life could be different. As he wrote, Marcus realized something profound. The ride that changed everything wasn't just about where he'd physically taken Walter that rainy night. It was about where Walter's words had taken Marcus, from emptiness to purpose, from resignation to hope, from merely existing to actually living. He'd given a stranger a ride. What he'd heard on the way had indeed changed his life forever. But more than that, he'd changed his own life. He'd done the work, he'd made the choices, he'd persevered. And now, the real journey was just beginning. 3 years later, Marcus stood in front of a classroom at Asheville Community College, looking at 35 students staring back at him with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. It was the first day of Introduction to Construction Management, and he was the guest lecturer. Professor Chen stood to the side, having introduced him simply as Marcus Webb, project manager at Morrison & Associates and one of our program's success stories. How many of you are here because you actually want to be? Marcus asked. About half the hands went up. How many are here because you're not sure what else to do? More hands. And how many are here because someone told you that you needed a degree to get ahead? The remaining hands rose, some sheepishly. Marcus smiled. Good, honest answers. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. A degree alone won't change your life. I know, weird thing to say in a college classroom, but it's true. He had their attention now. 5 years ago, I was a 42-year-old construction worker going through a divorce, feeling like my life was essentially over, except for my kids. I'd been doing the same job for 20 years, making okay money, but completely unfulfilled. Then one rainy night, I picked up a hitchhiker. Marcus spent the next hour telling his story, not glossing over the hard parts, the failed math exams, the exhaustion, the moments he wanted to quit. But also the breakthroughs, the small victories, the gradual realization that he was capable of more than he thought. The degree didn't change my life, Marcus concluded. The decision to change changed my life. The degree was just a tool I used to build something different. So if you're here just to get a piece of paper, you're wasting your time and money. But if you're here because you want to actually become someone who can do something meaningful, then welcome. It's going to be hard, but it's worth it. After class, several students approached him with questions. One was a woman in her late 30s named Jennifer Chen, no relation to the professor. Your story really resonated with me, she said. I'm 38, just got laid off from retail management, and I'm terrified that I'm too old to start over. Marcus shook his head. I was 42 when I started. If anything, your life experience is an advantage. You know how to work hard, how to deal with difficult people, how to solve problems. You just need to learn the technical knowledge. What if I'm not smart enough? I failed my second math exam, got a 58%. I'm not naturally gifted at academics, but I learned how to study, how to ask for help, and how to keep going even when it was hard. That's not about intelligence. That's about determination. Jennifer's eyes welled up slightly. Thank you. I needed to hear that. As she walked away, Marcus felt something click into place. This was why Professor Chen had asked him to guest lecture, not just to share information, but to give hope to people who were where he'd been, scared, uncertain, but willing to try. Marcus's career at Morrison & Associates had flourished over the past 3 years. He'd managed the completion of the Riverside Medical Center project, earning praise from the owner for bringing it in under budget and ahead of schedule. He'd then taken on progressively larger projects, a university dormitory, a mixed-use commercial development, and most recently, a $15 million renovation of a historic downtown building. His salary had increased to $72,000 annually, and Pat had begun including him in business development meetings with potential clients. The succession planning she'd mentioned was becoming real. Pat was training Marcus and 2 other project managers to eventually take over the company. But beyond the career success, Marcus had found something more valuable, a sense of purpose. He'd started mentoring young project coordinators at Morrison & Associates, sharing what he'd learned and helping them navigate the challenges of the industry. He'd volunteered as a guest speaker at the community college twice a semester, always telling his story and answering questions from students who saw themselves in his journey. And he'd maintained his friendship with Walter, who had become a profound influence on his life. They talked every few weeks, sometimes about work or family, but often about bigger questions. What made life meaningful, how to handle setbacks, what it meant to live with intention. One evening in late September, Marcus received a call from Walter's daughter, Claire. Marcus, this is Claire Price. My father talks about you often. Marcus felt a knot of worry form in his stomach. Is Walter okay? He's in the hospital. He had a stroke 3 days ago. It's serious. Marcus's chest tightened. Is he going to be okay? The doctors say he'll survive, but he's going to need significant rehabilitation. He's asking for you. He wants to see you. I'll drive up tomorrow. What hospital? Claire gave him the details, and Marcus immediately requested time off from work. Pat didn't hesitate to approve it. Family emergency, she asked. Close friend. The man who changed my life. Then go. Take whatever time you need. The drive to Johnson City felt longer than Marcus remembered. When he arrived at the hospital, Claire met him in the waiting area. She was in her mid-50s, with her father's kind eyes and a tired smile. Thank you for coming. Dad's been asking about you every day. He'll be so happy to see you. She led Marcus to Walter's room. The old man lay in bed, looking smaller and more fragile than Marcus had ever seen him. His left side was partially paralyzed from the stroke, and his speech was slurred, but his eyes lit up when Marcus entered. Marcus, Walter managed, his voice thick but warm. Hey, Walter. Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed and took Walter's right hand. You gave me quite a scare. Sorry, I didn't mean to. How are you feeling? Like, I got hit by a truck. Walter smiled weakly at his own joke. But I'm alive. That's something. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Walter spoke again, his words coming slowly but deliberately. Been thinking a lot. When you face mortality, you think about what matters. Save your strength. We can talk later. No, need to. Say this. Walter's grip on Marcus's hand tightened slightly. You gave an old man purpose, reminded me why I taught, why I cared about helping people. Walter, you helped me, not the other way around. We helped each other. That's how it works. You pay forward what others gave you. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. You're going to be okay. You'll recover and be back to your old self. Walter's eyes were knowing, sad, but accepting. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not the point. Point is, I lived well, no regrets, because I chose to live with purpose. You taught me that. And now, you're teaching others. See, the circle continues. Claire brought them coffee and quietly left to give them privacy. For the next hour, Marcus and Walter talked, or rather Marcus talked, while Walter listened and occasionally interjected with short comments. Marcus told him about the latest projects, about Emma starting high school with straight A's, about Jake making the travel basketball team, about the students he'd spoken to at the community college. You're doing it right, Walter said when Marcus finished, building a life that matters. Because you showed me how. No, because you chose to. Over the next week, Marcus visited Walter every day. He took a week off work, staying in a hotel near the hospital, spending hours at Walter's bedside. They talked when Walter had the energy, and Marcus read aloud to him when he didn't. Poetry, philosophy, the books Walter had loved as a teacher. Gradually, Walter's strength improved. His speech became clearer, and he regained some movement in his left side. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery, though he would need months of physical therapy. On Marcus's last day before returning to Asheville, Walter was sitting up in bed, looking more like himself. You need to get back to your life, Walter said, his speech nearly normal now. Stop babysitting an old man. I wanted to be here. You were there for me when I needed someone. And now, we're even, so go back. Build your career, raise your kids, live that life. We talked about. I will, but I'll call every week. I'd like that. Marcus stood to leave, then turned back. Walter, when you gave me your phone number that night in the rain, did you think I'd actually call? Walter smiled. Honestly? No, most people don't. But I hoped you would. And I'm glad you did. So am I. Back in Asheville, Marcus threw himself into work with renewed energy. Walter's stroke had reminded him that time was precious, that opportunities shouldn't be wasted, that the relationships we build are ultimately what give life meaning. In November, Pat called Marcus into her office for a serious conversation. Morrison & Associates is expanding, she began. We've been approached by a developer in Charlotte about opening a satellite office there. It would focus on commercial and institutional projects, hospitals, schools, government buildings. Bigger projects than what we typically handle here. That's exciting. It is. And it's also an opportunity. I need someone to lead that office. Someone who understands project management, who can build client relationships, and who has the leadership skills to build and manage a team. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. You're offering me the position. I'm offering you the opportunity to compete for it. You and Brad Simmons. Brad was one of the other project managers Pat had been grooming, 5 years older than Marcus, with more experience but less drive. Over the next 3 months, I want both of you to develop a business plan for the Charlotte office. Market analysis, staffing plan, projected revenue, everything. The person with the better plan gets the job. What does the position pay? $95,000 base, plus bonuses based on office performance. You'd be a vice president, a partner track position. It was more money than Marcus had ever imagined making. It was also more responsibility, more pressure, more risk. I'm interested, Marcus said. Good, because I think you're ready for this. You've grown more in 3 years than most people do in 10. But Brad has seniority, and some of our board members will favor experience over potential. You'll need to prove yourself. For the next 3 months, Marcus lived and breathed the Charlotte office proposal. He researched the market, interviewed developers and contractors in the Charlotte area, analyzed competitors, and built financial projections. He worked evenings and weekends, sacrificing sleep but not time with his kids. He'd learned that lesson. Emma and Jake noticed his increased stress. "Dad, are you okay?" Emma asked one Saturday while they were having lunch. "You seem really focused on something." Marcus decided to be honest. "I'm competing for a promotion at work. It's a big opportunity, but it's also a lot of pressure." "What kind of opportunity?" "I'd run a new office in Charlotte, manage bigger projects. It would be a significant step up in my career." Jake asked, "Would you have to move to Charlotte?" "No. I travel there a few times a month, but I'd still live here. I'd never leave you guys." Emma studied him with those perceptive eyes that reminded him so much of Sarah. "Do you want this promotion?" "Yeah, I do. It would mean I'm really building something, not just doing a job, but creating something meaningful." "Then you'll get it," Emma said with teenage certainty. "You always figure things out." Her confidence meant more than she knew. In early February, Marcus submitted his business plan to Pat and the board. It was 147 pages of detailed analysis, financial projections, staffing strategies, and market positioning. He'd identified specific potential clients, outlined marketing strategies, and created a 5-year growth plan. 2 weeks later, he presented it to the board of directors, 5 people, including Pat, asking pointed questions and challenging his assumptions. Brad presented his plan the same day, and Marcus had to admit it was solid. More conservative than Marcus's approach, but thorough and well-reasoned. The board deliberated for a week. Marcus tried to focus on his current projects, but the waiting was excruciating. Finally, Pat called him into her office. "The board made their decision," she said, her face unreadable. Marcus's heart pounded. "And?" It was close. Brad's plan was excellent, conservative, safe, likely to succeed. Yours was more ambitious, more aggressive, with higher risk but also higher potential reward. "Okay." The board is split. Half want Brad's safer approach. "But I cast the deciding vote, and I'm choosing you." Marcus felt lightheaded. "Really? Really? Because this company needs to grow, and growth requires vision and ambition, not just competence. Brad would run a successful small office. You'll build something significant." Pat extended her hand. "Congratulations, Vice President Webb. The Charlotte office is yours." Marcus shook her hand, almost unable to process what was happening. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." "You start building your team next month. Office opens in April." That evening, Marcus called everyone important in his life. Emma and Jake screamed with excitement. Sarah congratulated him warmly. Devon insisted on taking him out for celebratory drinks. Professor Chen sent a proud email, and Walter, now recovered enough to return home with in-home care, listened to the news with obvious joy. "Vice President," Walter said, 5 years ago, you were a construction worker wondering if your life was over. And now I'm running an office, building a team, creating something from nothing because you asked me a question." "No, Marcus, because you answered it with action. The question was just a catalyst. You did the hard work." "I want to do something," Marcus said, "to honor what you gave me. I'm thinking about starting a scholarship at the community college. For non-traditional students, people going back to school later in life, people like I was." Walter was quiet for a moment. "That's a beautiful idea. What would you call it?" "The Second Chances Scholarship, because it's never too late to choose a different path." "I love it, and I'd like to contribute to it. I have some retirement savings I won't need. I'd rather invest in people's futures." Over the next several months, Marcus and Walter worked together to establish the scholarship fund. They contributed $10,000 each, and Pat Morrison matched it. Professor Chen helped with the administrative setup through the college foundation. The first scholarship would be awarded in the fall, enough to cover tuition and books for one student for 2 semesters. Not much, perhaps, but a start, a way of paying forward what had been given to them. The Charlotte office opened in April with Marcus as its leader. He hired 4 project coordinators, 2 project managers, and an office administrator. One of his first hires was Jennifer Chen, the woman who'd approached him after his guest lecture. She'd completed her degree with honors and proven herself capable and driven. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," she told Marcus on her first day. "I won't let you down." "Just pay it forward someday," Marcus replied. "That's all I ask." The office's first project was a $20 million renovation of a historic courthouse, then a medical office building, then a new elementary school. Within a year, the Charlotte office was not just successful, but thriving, generating revenue that exceeded Marcus's projections. But the numbers weren't what fulfilled Marcus. It was building a team, mentoring young professionals, solving complex problems, and creating something meaningful. It was seeing Jennifer grow from uncertain beginner to confident project manager. It was knowing that his work had impact, buildings that would serve communities for decades. One Saturday in October, 5 years after that rainy night when he'd picked up a hitchhiker, Marcus attended the Second Chances Scholarship Award ceremony at the community college. The recipient was a 47-year-old woman named Lisa Rodriguez, who'd been laid off from manufacturing and was returning to school to become a civil engineer. Lisa gave a short speech, her voice shaking with emotion. "I thought my life was essentially over. I thought I was too old, too tired, too far behind to start something new. This scholarship isn't just about money. It's about someone believing that people like me can still achieve our dreams. Thank you for that belief." Marcus watched her with tears in his eyes. He saw himself in her fear and her hope. He saw how a small act of faith, asking a question, giving a ride, creating a scholarship, could ripple outward in ways impossible to predict. After the ceremony, Walter found Marcus in the crowd. The old man was walking with a cane now, his recovery impressive but incomplete. But his mind was sharp, and his eyes were bright. "Quite a moment," Walter said. "Yeah, it really was. You've built something special, Marcus. Not just a career, but a life of meaning. That's rare. I learned from the best." They stood together watching students and families celebrate, the autumn sun warm on their faces. "You know what I realized?" Marcus said. "That night I picked you up, I almost didn't stop. I was tired, it was late, and picking up hitchhikers seemed like a bad idea, but something made me pull over. What do you think it was?" "I think it was readiness. I was ready to change, even if I didn't know it yet, and you gave me the push I needed." Walter nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But here's what I've learned in my 77 years. We're all always ready for change. We just need someone to ask us the right question at the right time, to hold up a mirror and let us see ourselves clearly." So what's the right question? It's different for everyone. For you, it was about where you'd be in 5 years. For someone else, it might be, what would you do if you weren't afraid, or what would make you proud of yourself? The specific words matter less than the willingness to examine your life honestly. Marcus thought about Lisa Rodriguez, about Jennifer Chen, about the dozens of students he'd spoken to over the years. How many of them had been ready for change and just needed someone to ask the right question? "I want to do more," Marcus said. "The scholarship is great, but I want to find more ways to help people who are where I was." "Then you will. You're just getting started." Over the next several years, Marcus expanded his impact. He started speaking at high schools about career pathways, talking to students about construction management as a viable alternative to traditional 4-year degrees. He created an apprenticeship program at Morrison & Associates specifically for career changers, providing paid training for people transitioning into construction management from other fields. Emma graduated from high school and enrolled in veterinary medicine at NC State. Jake, now 16, was seriously considering construction management himself, inspired by his father's journey. Marcus's relationship with Sarah had evolved into genuine friendship. She'd remarried, and Marcus was happy for her. They co-parented effectively, both focused on what was best for their kids rather than old resentments. The Charlotte office continued to thrive. Marcus earned his professional constructor certification and was invited to speak at national construction management conferences. His salary had reached 6 figures, and Pat had made him a junior partner in Morrison & Associates. But what Marcus valued most wasn't the money or the title. It was the letters and emails he received from people whose lives had changed after hearing his story. The single mother who'd gone back to school, the laid-off factory worker who'd found a new career, the veterans struggling to transition to civilian life who'd found purpose in construction management. Each one was a reminder that the ride that changed everything hadn't been a single night in the rain. It had been the beginning of a ripple that continued spreading outward, touching lives in ways Marcus could never have imagined. On a crisp October evening, 8 years after picking up Walter in the rain, Marcus stood in front of another classroom at the community college. But this time, he wasn't a guest lecturer. He was teaching his own class, a special evening seminar called Career Transitions, It's Never Too Late. The class met once a week for 10 weeks and focused on helping adult students navigate the practical and psychological challenges of returning to school. Marcus co-taught it with Professor Chen, who'd become not just a mentor, but a close friend. 23 students sat in front of him, ranging in age from 32 to 61. Each had their own story, their own reasons for being there, their own fears and hopes. "How many of you are terrified right now?" Marcus asked. Every hand went up. "Good. Fear means you're taking a real risk, attempting something that matters. The question isn't whether you're afraid, it's what you do with that fear." He told them his story, the same story he'd told dozens of times, but never tired of sharing. About being lost, about a chance encounter, about a question that changed everything. "A wise man once asked me where I'd be in 5 years if I didn't make changes," Marcus said. "I'm asking you the same question. Where will you be in 5 years if you keep doing what you're doing? And more importantly, where could you be if you make different choices?" The room was silent, students contemplating their futures. Then a man in his 50s raised his hand. "What if we fail?" Marcus smiled. "Then you fail, and you learn from it, and you try again. I failed exams. I made mistakes on the job. I had moments where I wanted to quit. But failure isn't the end of your story unless you let it be." "What if we're too old?" a woman asked. "Too old for what? Learning, growing, building something meaningful? I started at 42. I've met people who went back to school in their 60s. Age is just a number. What matters is your willingness to try." Over the next 10 weeks, Marcus watched his students struggle and grow. Some would succeed, some would drop out, but all of them would have tried, and that was what mattered. On the last night of class, a woman named Patricia Miller approached him. She was 58, had worked retail for 30 years, and was now pursuing a degree in business administration. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "not just for teaching this class, but for showing us that second chances are real, that it's not too late." "It's never too late," Marcus said. "As long as you're breathing, you can choose a different path." I'm going to remember that. That night, driving home through the mountains, Marcus thought about the journey, from a lost construction worker to a vice president and educator, from emptiness to purpose, from merely existing to truly living. His phone rang, Walter's number. "Hey Walter, how are you?" "I'm good, just wanted to check in. How was class tonight?" "Good, really good. I think we're making a difference." "You are, more than you know." They talked for a while about small things and big things, the way old friends do. Before hanging up, Walter said, "Marcus, I've been thinking about writing a memoir, about my experiences teaching, the lessons I learned, the mistakes I made. I'd like to include your story if that's okay." "Of course, but why?" "Because people need to hear stories of transformation. They need to know that change is possible, that one decision can alter the trajectory of your life. Your story embodies that." "So does yours. Then maybe we'll both write books someday, tell our stories, help more people." After they hung up, Marcus thought about that. A book. Another way to reach people, to ask the right questions, to inspire change. Maybe. Someday. 10 years after that rainy night, Marcus Webb stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for a new community college campus in Charlotte. He was there as both a donor, having contributed significantly to the construction management program, and as a speaker. The college president introduced him. Marcus Webb started his career as a construction worker. Today, he's vice president of Morrison & Associates, an award-winning construction management firm. He's also an educator, mentor, and advocate for second chance education. His journey embodies what this new campus represents: opportunity, transformation, and the belief that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. Marcus took the podium, looking at the crowd of students, faculty, community members, and business leaders. 10 years ago, he began, I was a man who'd given up on himself. I thought my life was essentially over, except for my kids. Then I made a decision that seemed insignificant at the time. I picked up a hitchhiker on a rainy night. He told the story once more, but this time with a decade of perspective. He talked about the compound effect of small decisions, about how one conversation can spark a chain reaction that changes not just one life, but many lives. That stranger asked me a simple question. Where would I be in 5 years if I didn't make changes? Today, 10 years later, I can answer that question. If I hadn't made changes, I'd still be going through the motions. Instead, I've built a career I'm proud of. I've helped dozens of people transition to new careers. I've watched my kids grow into remarkable young adults. I've lived instead of just existing." He paused, looking at the students in the crowd. "So I'm asking you the same question that stranger asked me. Where will you be in 5 years? Will you be exactly where you are now, just older? Or will you be somewhere new, somewhere better, somewhere you chose to be?" The applause was warm and genuine. After the ceremony, students and community members approached Marcus to share their own stories of transformation, to thank him for his advocacy, to tell him how he'd inspired them. One young woman, no more than 20, said, "My dad heard you speak 3 years ago. He was a mechanic, felt stuck in his job. After hearing your story, he went back to school. He just graduated with a degree in engineering technology. He says you changed his life." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Tell your dad I'm proud of him, and that he changed his own life. I just asked a question." That evening, Marcus sat on his porch, a real house now, a modest 3-bedroom he'd purchased 2 years ago, and called Walter. "Big day," Walter said when he answered. "I saw the photos on the college website, quite an impressive ceremony." It was. Made me think about how far things have come, and how far they'll continue to go. Your impact keeps expanding, Marcus. And that's the beauty of choosing to live with purpose. It never stops with just you. I've been thinking about what you said, about writing a book. Oh? I think I'm ready. Not just to tell my story, but to help other people find their own. To ask them the right questions. That's wonderful. What would you call it? Marcus thought for a moment. The ride that changed everything. How one question can transform your life. Perfect. When will you start? Soon. After I finish this current project, after Emma's graduation from vet school, after I've lived a bit more and have more wisdom to share. Walter chuckled. Fair enough, but don't wait too long. The world needs your story. They talked until the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. 2 old friends, connected by a chance encounter, reflecting on the journey and looking toward the future. Marcus Webb never forgot the lesson he learned that rainy October night, that transformation begins with a question, that it's never too late to change direction, and that one decision can alter the course of your entire life. He built a career that mattered. He raised kids who understood the value of perseverance and growth. He helped dozens of people find their own second chances. He lived with intention and purpose, grateful for every day. And sometimes, late at night, driving through mountain roads in the rain, Marcus would think about the man he'd been 10 years ago. Lost, empty, resigned to a life half-lived. That man was gone now, replaced by someone who knew that life was full of possibility, that change was always available, and that sometimes the most significant moments come when you simply decide to stop and help a stranger in need. The ride that changed everything hadn't been about a destination. It had been about a question, a conversation, and the courage to examine your life honestly and choose something different. Marcus had given a stranger a ride. What he'd heard on the way had changed his life forever, but more importantly, he'd taken that change and multiplied it, spreading it forward to others who needed the same message he'd needed that night. It's never too late. Where will you be in 5 years? What life are you choosing to live? Those questions continued to echo, rippling outward, changing lives one conversation at a time. And in the end, that was the true story. Not just about one man's transformation, but about how that transformation became a catalyst for countless others. The ride that changed everything had become a journey that would never truly end.